The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome to Optimum Solutions Business Continuity Plans for HRIS webinar. My name is Susan Warren and I'll be your presenter today. Interruptions to business processes are always frightening because if we are not prepared for the worst, they can result in all sorts of negative repercussions. Loss of product, loss of income, loss of reputation. If you can't recover from the interruption, the losses will be devastating. When we're done today, I want you to have a better understanding of what you can do for your organization, and more importantly for our audience today, for your HRIS department, to survive an interruption that could be catastrophic if you aren't prepared. Today, we'll be looking at the differences between disaster recovery and business continuity, and some key components to both disaster recovery and business continuity. We'll take a comprehensive look at business continuity, including a business continuity planning cycle. We're going to discuss some suggestions for creating business continuity recovery plans for both an entire organization and, as I mentioned before, specifically for this audience, we're going to address business continuity recovery plans for HRIS departments. When we talk about a disaster recovery plan, the goal is to reestablish essential operations, and you would do that by protection of the tools of your business, the things that make your business work. And that's probably different for everyone listening today, but I suspect each one of you knows immediately exactly what that would be for you. If you're a manufacturing facility, it's the machines in the plant. If you produce custom graphics, it's the printing presses. But for almost every company today, our computer systems, both hardware and software, are essential to the operation of our business. Either internally or externally, you have to maintain backups that can be restored so that you can preserve the integrity of your data in case of a disaster. You must provide security for your facilities. This would include those on-site backups and documentation. You need to make sure that data flow can continue in as uninterrupted a fashion as possible in the case of a disaster. Because you have a good disaster recovery plan in place, your business continuity plan can use those strong tools to keep your business running. This will be the plan that provides alternative locations for employees to work and make sure that there are backups for employees who are not able to work. Those hardware and software systems that the disaster recovery plan ensured would function, well, now the business continuity plan puts them to work when and where they need to be deployed. For example, you may have several payroll processors running payrolls for their locations from their laptops at their homes over VPN connections. There are lots of different types of disasters that might cause you to need a business continuity plan, and they don't even have to be catastrophic. It can be as simple as a power outage, especially if the whole grid goes out. What would you do? You need to have a plan. Already this year, we've had Hurricane Florence, California wildfires, the Kilauea volcanic eruption, which came right on the heels of devastating storms, flooding, landslides, and mudslides in Hawaii. And I had this PowerPoint prepared before Hurricane Michael hit the Gulf Coast states week before last. And these are just the most recently federally declared disasters. You may have had other local or regional issues that affected your business operations. Let's work off of the power outage catastrophe for a minute. Think of all the things that might happen to just the payroll department if the power went out for the whole week of payroll processing. Now, your employees might understand because their power might be out too. But would their auto financing company if they couldn't make their car payment? Their mortgage company? What about the child support state disbursement units? What about union contracts that require payments? Tax payments and filings? There are numerous external entities that rely on a timely payroll. The key component to both disaster recovery and business continuity is having comprehensive plans in place. And we're going to spend the rest of our time today talking about how you can create your own plans. Your plans need to identify what methods you intend to use to communicate with your key stakeholders. Your plan needs to have complete buy-in from your senior management. You should work out emergency contacts, that is, contacts outside your own organization, like police, fire, FEMA contacts, and do that before there's the need for them. And perhaps the most important part of any plan is that it must be communicated to everyone on your team. When you consider emergency management, think about how you're going to repair and/or restart the critical business processes. Try to determine a period of time that you can afford to be down, and once you've identified that window, you know how long you have to tackle the bare minimum to get back up on your feet. Yes, you may have to adjust in the real-life situation, but having a plan beforehand is invaluable. And then when you consider continuity planning, think about how you can resume your regular business processes. How soon can you get back to normal? It may be a new normal, but determine what that window of time will be as well. I like to think of comprehensive disaster recovery and emergency management as yin and yang, opposites but complementary forces that balance one another. During the disaster recovery planning phase, you have to begin your project by analyzing all of your business processes. You have to come up with a strategy to mitigate any destructive effects of a catastrophe. You have to build a plan, then test it, educate your employees, and maintain that plan. Then, if you ever have to resort to emergency management, you kick into prevention, like boarding up your windows and powering down your systems. And response, you'd call in storm remediation teams. Recovery, where you do cleanup. Restore, where you would rebuild. And then you would resume or get back to normal. When you build your business continuity team, either for your company or for your HRIS department, include your subject matter experts. You will need everyone who has any decision-making authority to be available for this team. For your HRIS team, be sure to include those subject matter experts too. If you have a tax person or a garnishments person, those specialists need to be on the team, not just the payroll and the HR manager. As you develop your plan, make sure that the steps you include are valid and make sure you don't leave out any required steps. Have you included everything that has an impact on your business? If you're facing a hurricane in July, you probably don't need to worry about the W-2 filing instructions. But you do need to worry about the Quarter 2 941. Weigh your risk assessments. Do you need to worry about the Quarter 2 941? Or do you feel confident that the IRS will make special allowances for storm-affected states? Plan ahead what your recovery strategy will be. If you're going to forego collecting time and just repeat the last payroll, project how long it will take you to make all of your employees whole again once you start making corrections. That's what's called RTO, or Recovery Time Objective, the amount of time it takes you to recover from a business interruption or disaster. Plan for the absolute worst. The disaster strikes the day before payroll is to be processed. What will you do? What will you need in order to pay your employees? Copies of the last check register? Paper check stock? These are the things you need to include in your plan. Recovery Point Objective, or RPO, is a measurement of time of data that you can lose in a disaster. 6 months of data? 1 year of data? Now, a lot of factors come into play here. Do you keep off-site backups? If so, perhaps you can stand to lose more data at your primary site because you can just restore files that get destroyed. If you archived paper or electronic copies of records, perhaps you can stand to lose more because you have a resource to fall back on. Consider whether it will cost you anything to lose or reconstruct data. You're going to have to get down to the nitty-gritty and determine what are the departmental business processes that are integral to your organization. How would it impact your business if those processes were disrupted? What about external resources that you rely on for support? Put yourself in someone else's shoes. How do you think it would affect Amazon if FedEx or UPS were targeted by cyber terrorists? Your plan should include realistic recovery time objectives. How long can you take to recover? And realistic recovery point objectives. How much data measured in time can you afford to lose? Honestly assess how prepared you are and consider what workarounds and resources you may have in place already. Here's the hard part. Just because you have a plan doesn't mean that everything is going to be just fine. Part of your plan needs to deal with risk assessments. For HRIS and payroll, the worst possible scenario seems like it would be not getting the payroll done. But if there is great loss of life in your region, folks getting paid a couple of days late may not be the worst scenario. Do your best to plan for the worst and accept what happens. For your recovery strategy, identify the functions that must be made whole as soon as possible. Know what your hardware and software system requirements are so that those can be recovered quickly. Prepare a displacement strategy. You may not be able to work in your normal facility. Will you work at a different campus, from home? Let everyone in the company or department know how backup positions work. One of the most important things that employers have to take care of in disasters is their employees. It's probably impossible for Mary to come into the office to work on payroll when her own house is missing the entire roof because of the tornado that wiped out half the town yesterday. Mary needs to be taken care of too. Once you create your plan, communicate it and update it as needed. Let's look at some recovery plan scenarios. Now, by disaster, you would refer to an event which renders the company's facilities unusable or inaccessible for a period of time estimated to exceed X number of days. In a worst-case scenario, the facilities are completely unusable and there is nothing salvageable. In a less severe interruption, you could resume some operations, and in a localized emergency, you may be able to have local vendors and utility companies repair or replace damaged infrastructure within X number of days. Components you want to be sure you include in your business continuity recovery plan would be documentation files. Again, these might be stored internally or located off-site. Also, computer files for your computer systems. Hopefully, you're doing regular backups and storing some backups off-site. And word to the wise, check your backups to make sure that they are good. Include your backup storage locations in your plan and document what is located where. The plan must include all internal and external contacts. Remember, cell towers could be down. So do you need to document addresses in your plan? If your payroll application is hosted in the cloud, it will be accessed through the internet. So contact the vendor that hosts your cloud application and see how they would be prepared to help you in an emergency. Document that in your plan, as they will definitely be one of the first calls you make if you have a crisis. Quantify resumption timeframes. These will be the timeframes that you determine it will take to get your time-sensitive systems up and running again so that the business may resume. This would be any date-sensitive processes like billing, payroll, accounts payable, perhaps general ledger, things like that. Include in your plan information anything related to your external stakeholders. This slide shows a partial list, like your bank for your ACH, the tax agencies where you make payments, and so forth. But this will be a different list for everyone listening today. And that's why it's vital that you get input from everyone internally so that you know who might also be affected externally if you suffer a disaster. Something else to consider, your system interfaces. For HRIS, this screen shows a good list of what you need to document, starting with time and attendance, going to your ERP system. Perhaps you have a benefits app, your general ledger and banking systems. You may have a tax processor you need to include, or employee or manager self-service. You may have a third-party repository where you store data. In your plan, list the exact names, addresses, phone numbers, and a contact name for each interface you rely on. And don't forget to update your plan if any of these change. Document in your plan how communication will take place. Will you use cell phones exclusively? Will you continue to use the work phones? How will you share reports? I have a PDF app on my cell phone, so I could send reports via email on my cell phone as PDFs. That is, if my cell phone were working in an emergency. Do your key personnel already have their own laptops, or will you need to distribute laptops to them so that they can work remotely? If that's the case, make sure they understand how and when they will receive the equipment they will need. And don't forget printers. Decide what you can keep on hold or print after business resumes, because printing may be an issue if a lot of staff are working remotely. When disaster strikes and you have to put the business continuity plan into action, the senior HRIS staff should meet, even if it's on the phone, to determine, first of all, it's not on this slide, but first of all, what's the status of department personnel? Are they safe and accounted for? Then, is the regular work site accessible and safe? What are the known impacts of the disaster, and what will be the plan going forward? How long might employees be out of the regular work site, and how long might systems be down? And how long will this impact payroll processing? What's the status of your other staff and your external stakeholders? Start a flow of communication to let everyone know the next steps, and make sure that everyone has the equipment and supplies that they will need to perform their tasks wherever they are. If you're not going to be able to work from your regular work site, set up your temporary workplace with the necessary equipment and supplies. Also set up schedules and make sure you have all the jobs covered for at least 2 weeks. And keep in mind that employees may need time to handle personal disasters of their own. And in payroll, even employees outside your department will need help with personal disasters. So if possible, plan to manage a contingency relief fund that you might use to assist employees with emergency funds. If you have employees working from home, make sure they have what they need to get their job done. It's highly likely that you will have a very fluid situation on your hands. So you have got to make everyone understand that communication is key. Changes will be the only thing that they can count on for a while, and everyone must pay close attention to all communication. When you're building your plan, it's a good idea to create a binder with all of the information documenting the plan. It should also contain the process required for accessing secured systems, like payroll. Who knows that information, and how can they be contacted? When you create your telephone contact list, include your IT help desk staff phone numbers. Include the Optimum support phone numbers. Consider what your risks may be and plan how you can keep them to a minimum and what your response will be in a worst case, less severe interruption, or a localized emergency. Document your list of off-site stored supplies and refresh or update them periodically. Document methods for contacting third-party resources. If you might need paper check stock, who will you call? Think about all the phases of your production, beginning with input all the way to output. Try to include everything that might be necessary. Here's a sample breakdown of input, process, and output that you may see in a typical payroll department. Yours may have more or less. You may only issue paper checks, so you may not have to worry about transferring bank files. Or you may need to add state new hire reporting to the list. You will definitely make this your own, depending on how long you are displaced. Successful disaster recovery and business continuity plans enlist the help of everyone who has important information to share and who can lend valuable assessments of possible needs and resources if a disaster strikes. Successful plans are tested and revised. Things change: names, phone numbers, vendors, systems. Update your plan to reflect these changes. Communication is vital. Without communication, your plan will never succeed. So today, I'll leave you with the duck. Document your plan, update your plan often, and communicate your plan. Be prepared, not scared. Thank you for joining us today. We hope you're leaving today's webinar with a better idea for a business continuity plan, not just for your company, but for your HRIS department as well. Please be on the lookout for more of our educational webinars soon, and email me if you have any suggestions for topics you'd like to see in future webinars. Thanks, and have an optimum day.